Welcome to another Simulation Pulse Live on a Friday at noon Central. Really appreciate you coming, and everybody who's watching afterwards on the video. Appreciate you checking this out. Today we have a great presentation. We have Mitch Luker from Northeast Wisconsin Technical College and Jamie Howell from Western Technical College. They're VR simulation gurus in my mind. I've been able to pick their brains and get a lot of great insights from them over the past several months or years in Mitch's case. And really excited to have them. They gave a presentation at IMSH in 2024 called, I think, Virtual Reality. Is it a good fit or is it the right fit? And that's what they'll be sharing with us today. So I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to them and let them take it from here. I should say too, feel free to ask any questions. I'll be monitoring the QA panel if anybody has any questions that they want to ask.
Well, and Mitch, I'm going to let you drive.
Excellent. So welcome everyone. My name is Mitch Luker and I'm the nursing simulation coordinator at Northeast Wisconsin Technical College. And I'll let Jamie introduce herself.
Yeah, I'm Jamie Howell. I'm the clinical simulation specialist here at Western Technical College in La Crosse, Wisconsin. And I work with high fidelity as well as most recently XR or virtual reality with our students in health and public safety. And I'm coming to you from our XR lab.
I'm coming to you from home.
Oh, so you're in the XR Center now, Jamie.
Yeah, this is my XR Center. So I have two of the pods behind me and I'm working from one and there's one next to me and a couple stations at the end. So
oh, that is awesome. Do you mind, I don't want to derail our presentation, but do you mind kind of talking a little bit about the setup of that? We can kind of see in the background. So you've got pods. What do you mean by a pod?
Yeah, so each of our sites, see if I can drive this a little bit. So we'll turn it around. You can see where I'm at. We have a monitor for our students to be able to view. Nice little QR code for evaluations. We have our headsets. Don't mind the cords. I added some extra here for my purpose for the Zoom webinar today. We have our headsets here, as well as our cleaning products. And then you can just kind of see, this is our lab, little welcome space. We can do some debriefing, a couple of chairs for our students, and then each of our little areas. And then we have our front monitor that heads out to the hallway that is currently broadcasting a welcome introduction video for our faculty who are doing tours. So as we have our admissions tours, they come in and they see my face and a little bit of information about what the XR lab has to offer to our students.
Oh, very cool. It looked like those were Quest 3 headsets that you're using there.
Yeah. Yep.
Excellent. And you've got a link cable to the PC set up. And there's a station, one VR headset per station.
We do.
So do you do those in groups then, where you have one student in VR, the other students are in non-VR kind of watching, and then they're taking turns, or how does that work?
Combination of both. It depends on what I'm doing. I do bring some students in one-on-one and we're working on some basic skills. I had a student in yesterday that needed some help with a care plan. So I brought her in. She was in one headset, I was in the other, and we were working together with a patient. A couple hours ago, right before this, I had 3 students in here doing a clinical makeup. So they were each at a pod and then I was at the instructor area. And then I've had up to 8 students. And when I have 8, then they are 2 to a station and one's in the headset while the other one's helping and navigating in the 2D world. And then they switch halfway through, or we do a second part to the scenario. So everybody gets time in the headsets.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
I saw you had the governor of the great state of Wisconsin in your lab at one point a few weeks ago. That
So
was
we
pretty
had the
cool.
governor, we had the department or the head of the Department of Health and Justice was here as well. He actually came in and put the headset on and was quite blown away with what Acadicus had to offer. So,
Oh, that's awesome. That's great to hear. Well, sorry again for derailing your presentation. I just wanted to I know a lot of people are very interested in how labs are set up. You know, they're all kind of thinking about where are they going to put their own VR lab and how are they going to set it up. And everybody's doing it a little different. You know, this is different than what we saw at NWTC. You know, they've got a similar layout, but a little different. And Madison College obviously has a completely different layout. So it's great to see these options.
Yeah, and I would say this is our, part one of our layout. We are actually talking about a full college simulation rebuild. So this was the best space that we had for the time until we build out exactly what I want.
Got you. Got you. Very cool.
Yeah.
All right, I'll turn it back over to you guys. Sorry about that.
Oh,
Thanks
no,
for
it's
sharing.
fine.
Appreciate it. That was great.
It just lends itself to our presentation.
Yes, exactly. We're not too far off topic.
Right.
Are we in the right kind of view format? I guess I'm not sure how much of what I'm moving things around and moving it into gallery mode. I'm just not sure whether I'm controlling that for everyone, or is there anything, does it look okay? Does the presentation look okay for everyone at this point?
Looks good.
So
That's
far, so
good.
good.
I can see
Cool.
you controlling it and I see the big.
Looks good to me, John.
so-
Awesome. Sounds great. All right, take it away. Oh, wow.
So these are our learning objectives for what we're presenting today. Mainly, we're going to talk about the concept of virtual reality simulation and its benefits for healthcare education and training. We're going to talk about the benefits and limitations of virtual reality simulation. We're also going to talk about key factors that should be considered when you're conducting a virtual reality needs assessment, and also discuss costs, resources, and steps for anyone that's interested in doing this. And since we're not IMSH, I can be Acadicus heavy and say it's the best one. It's the one you should use.
Right.
So I'll let Jamie start us off here.
All right. So what is virtual reality or VR? It's really interesting when I start presenting this to my coworkers. They're like, oh, the VR lab. I'm like, oh, wait, it's so much more than VR. We also have extended reality, XR, or mixed reality, and I have AR here as well. So you can see the different types of technologies on your screen. With augmented reality, this is something that's going to superimpose generated images. So think about like HoloLens, and we'll see some of that utilized with simulators and some of the simulator companies that are out there that are utilizing that equipment. So that's one type of reality. Virtual reality is where Acadicus really plays in, right? We have our headsets, we can get into a different world, enter that space, and be able to bring images and environments and interactive materials to our students or to those that we're training and working with. With mixed reality, we're looking at, again, real world environments, but also computer generated ones. So it's kind of like a myriad or marriage of those. With that, we see the physical and virtual objects can interact, and we can interact with them in real time. And then extended reality, you're going to hear a lot of us, and I think Bill Ballow's on today too. His lab, my lab, they're called XR labs because we're using that to catch all of these terms and bring in all of these features into one space. So that's where extended reality comes in. So benefits and limitations. I really agree with that statement. They only live in our mind. You're going to see some differences and some similarities across the board as we start to look at benefits and limitations with these. Obviously, benefits, we're going to hope to bring about a group feel of empathy. We want our students to be able to work with health and public safety issues and bring current relevance to topics and do so through these spaces. We have with augmented reality that combination of engagement, interactivity. The other thing that's nice, and you're going to see this benefit throughout, is safety. we're able to keep our students in a safe environment with this. And they get to immerse themselves into different spaces. So I think about the augmented reality that I use in my simulation space upstairs with my high fidelity simulators. And with that, we have some augmented reality lenses and we have overlays, hollow lenses that we're able to look at and see different pictures on top of our patients so that the students can understand how those things work and the inner workings of the body as, say, a patient's going through a labor and delivery scenario. With any of the benefits, right, with all of these, there will be some limitations. Cost tends to be a big limitation. To be able to utilize augmented reality, we're looking at, you know, potentially having not only headset costs, but if it's coming with a simulator, then you have simulator costs as well. There are other platforms out there, so I always tell people to make sure that you get out and peruse those. Updates will also be costly. And then we look at access. So is it equitable? Is everyone able to get access? In an augmented reality situation, we have to have students on site. Are they all able to get here? And do they have access to the equipment? Another big one that we're going to see, and this is going to be across the board, is our faculty and instructor buy-in. It was one of my big worries when I brought up extended reality options at Western Technical College. How is our faculty going to feel? Are they going to understand the technology? Are they ready for these changes? And I got on the phone yesterday with Mitch and I was so excited. I couldn't wait to tell him. I just brought on 2 new programs yesterday that can't wait for us to be able to build out some things for them to utilize in our Acadicus virtual reality world. So exciting stuff. We can move to the next slide. So then virtual reality, this is where Acadicus's main platform lives, right? This is immersive, engaging. We're able to take our students again into that safe space. It's a risk-free environment. I can take our fire students out. I can take our EMS, EMT, paramedic students out onto the bluffs, but guess what? They're not on the bluffs, they're in a classroom on a safe and secure mat, utilizing these headsets, but they can still interact with patients that are having injuries or unsafe atmospheres where they need to be able to take care of their patients. And they can do so in the comfort of this lab. We are able to get effective upscaling, including soft skills. We know that these simulations are extremely lifelike. When I was showing you guys the tour of this space, I had QR codes around the room. Those are so the students can give me feedback. How do they feel about the simulation? What did they learn? Do they feel like they're safe? Is it realistic? And our surveys have been just astronomical in how pleased they are with it. So it's been amazing. Some of the limitations are potential adverse physical side effects. So Mitch and I have a way that we bring this about, and we tell our students that please let us know if you feel any differently than you do right now. As soon as I started using that, physical side effects went away. So I worry sometimes if we start bringing in that, you know, you might have some maybe motion sickness, which is very rare with this, but it could be suggestive. So as long as I use that line, I haven't had anyone need to get out of the headset, which has been awesome. We look at cost for development, equipment, and maintenance. So not only is there equipment costs up front, but we also need to look at some of these other costs too. So those can be some limitations. Time cost. Obviously, if I'm building out some projects for some programs, there's going to be a time cost involved to the college or to whatever organization that you're working with. Lack of scalability, and then again, that faculty and instructor buy-in, but so far so good on my end.
I'll add in, I have not had a major issue with faculty and instructor buy-in. The big thing that happened at first is everybody is like, oh, this is scary. And then once they get in and they start playing with it and they see it, then my faculty are like, oh, this is awesome. And I have the bigger problem right now of everybody wants something and I can't do it all at one time. So Um, and just going back to time cost for making them, I will say the nice thing with the Acadicus. So I am right now currently building a scenario from scratch. I started in a blank room and I have spent probably about a total of 3 hours and I've already almost finished the entire scene. So it doesn't take a ton of time once you get used to building an Acadicus.
And then mixed reality, again, many of the benefits and limitations are going to be quite similar. A little different for the mixed reality is going to be the repeatedly practiced. That's going to be one of those benefits. When you're in that space, you're going to be able to interact with the virtual equipment as well as your hands-on equipment that you have in your simulation spaces or labs. So they get that repeated practice. With that, you're also going to see some decrease in the cost because you're using a little more of potentially the equipment you already have, right? As far as limitations, it's going to be those upfront costs. And so that's where we really start bringing in the next pieces of our presentation, that planning. So knowing that some of those equipment costs and upfront costs are going to be there, and that can be a potential limitation that you need to plan for.
So the needs assessment is the one thing that I think that most people overlook and don't consider when they're getting started with virtual reality. And then that leaves a bad taste in their mouth when things don't go right. So we're going to tell you how to prevent that from happening so that when you start this program, it's not going to be as, you're not going to have as many hurdles, hopefully, to overcome. So why do we do a needs assessment? Same thing as with regular simulation. The only difference is, and this is something John had said once before, and I loved it, instead of plastic, we're using pixels. So it's the same type of thought process behind what you would do even in regular simulation. And it's really about setting up yourself for success by determining what do you need, and then making sure that as you do that, you are considering the whole picture of what you're looking for. And so research is showing us that when your curricula is developed based on results from a needs assessment, you're going to have better outcomes because you're more targeted towards what you actually need. So the three phases of the needs assessment, the first part is the organizational analysis. So this is where you're looking at the big, I say like 30,000 foot picture. You're going to be looking out. So where do we need to use virtual reality or augmented reality? What type of things are we wanting to do? What is the goal of what we want to get out of it? My mandate was they wanted to increase enrollment capability at NWTC. So that was my focus. And our big challenge then was clinical sites. And so by being able to almost make a clinical site in virtual reality, that really allowed us, we've already increased our enrollment capacity by 16. And we are hoping to get to 128 enrollment per semester. The next part then is the job or task. So once you know what you want within the organization and you have an idea there, then you're going to go to the job or task analysis. So we're going to start saying, what are the knowledge, skills, attributes, and other characteristics that we need to have completed in this or evaluated? And that's one of the most important. The organizational part is really important, but in that job or task analysis, that's then where you're going to say, okay, what is the right software that fits my needs? What is the right headset then that works with that software? What technology, such as computers, screens, things like that, you're going to set and say, like, okay, what all do we need to make all of this work together to get to the task that we need? And then the person analysis is the part of who needs training. So is it students? Is it faculty? Is it your leadership? And don't forget about leadership as part of this, because they're the person who are going to A, give you money, and B, help promote your work so that way it can go further into your organization. So what I mean by that is if I didn't have my direct leadership supporting me to the executive leadership, it wouldn't have gone anywhere. So sometimes you got to make sure, who needs the training and if that learner is your leaders. And also, are your learners ready to be trained in this way? That was a concern. And like Jamie talked about with faculty buy-in, are the learners who are faculty, as they're learning the software and learning how to do this stuff, are they ready for that type of learning? An example is that we launched Acadicus in our lab in August, and we also we'd switched our learning management system from Blackboard to Canvas. So I didn't want faculty trying to learn to do VR at that time because they were too busy trying to learn Canvas. And that overwhelming them could have made them say, you know what, I'm out. I can't do this. I'm not engaged at all. And then they may not have ever come back to it. So like right now, I'm kind of running everything for them. I handle all the VR and so now we're starting to train them slowly and get a few people in, and then we're going to work on getting more and more as we go forward. So how do we get started? Start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can. This has become my motto with VR. And Jamie had to use that motto a bit, and I'll let her share a little bit of her story in a bit. But that's kind of how we started. I was using equipment that was around. I put it together in a space and we worked with it. And the great thing was that helped informed a lot about how we set up my lab, how we are running our VRs. So what you need to do is first complete your needs assessment, figure out what you need, how much you need. Jamie's lab has 4 stations. Mine has 8 because I was looking for an entire clinical group to be able to come in at a time. So that's figure out what you need and then find your space. I think Jamie did no remodel of her space at all. She just was able to find a room and make it work with what she has.
I might have commandeered a room.
Yeah. And in the beginning, I just used a room, and made it work. And then once we were able to prove the concept to our executive leadership, we were able to get our lab and actually do construction and make it, what exactly we wanted. And then you're going to pick out your software, which again, Acadicus is the best. But this is an important piece of what is it you're looking to do. If you're looking for high fidelity virtual reality simulation, you need Acadicus. If you're looking for something that's going to do where your faculty are going to not be involved and your students are just going to go off and do something independently, then that may be something else. So determine what you want to do and then what software will get there. And then you can start buying equipment. But this is the order that I found of doing things that works the best and prevents you from wasting money, because I wasted a bit of money at times because I bought wrong headsets and I bought that didn't work with what we needed. So sometimes you have to kind of start with what you have, figure out what you need, and then go from there. And then just some information about OpenRN. So this was a project that was started with a 2.5 million grant in 2019. And that funded us creating 25 virtual reality scenarios as a partner with Acadicus. And I will say that those 25 are pretty fantastic. Jamie authored several of them, including a birthing scenario that has a transgender male patient who delivers. I think you also made what, human trafficking?
I did. Yes, there's a human trafficking one in there. It comes off as a fetal demise patient, but once you delve in, you realize that it's not just a woman who has had a miscarriage. You're dealing with a patient who has been trafficked.
Yeah, so good stuff in there. I know I made a pharmacology one in as part of that, along with some others. So lots of great patients in there and things that you can use, and they're all available for free. And on the Acadicus wiki, there is the paperwork that tells you how to use them. And You can edit, tweak, change as long as you credit back OpenRN for the original creation.
And maybe we should plug at this point that next Friday we're going to have a watch party on a mini documentary on the OpenRN project, which features the work that Mitch and Jamie are doing as well. So next Friday at noon Central, we'll be watching that video, and you can learn more about OpenRN and more about the programs that are using it at this point.
Oh, we're super excited.
And we're going to have a panel discussion afterwards so that people can ask questions from people who are actually using it and have worked with it. So, and we'll be here to answer any questions. Jamie, myself, and a few other people are going to be joining, and we're here to help make sure that, again, you learn the lessons we learned without having to go through the pain of those lessons.
And the Friday after that, so the three next Fridays in March, Bill will be talking about the nursing implementation of the OER scenarios, of the OpenRN scenarios at Madison College. So we'll be doing a full victory lap on the OpenRN project throughout March. So
that's awesome.
And that is the end of our presentation. Do we have any questions, John, from anyone?
Rick says he's going to steal the idea of plastics versus pixels. I love.
That was John. It was you, John, and I loved it.
I used to say bricks and clicks. Well, I used to say, yeah, well, because my background is in architecture, we were doing all kinds of architectural stuff, and I would always tell people it's a lot easier to move pixels than it is to move bricks. So you really want to make sure you visualize your buildings virtually before you build them. So in the case of mannequins, though, it's plastic versus pixels. So
Right.
Well, it's a great presentation. Thank you very much for sharing it. Really appreciate that. No questions so far. One of the things, let's see, I had a couple of questions I was going to ask. Have you ever run simulations across schools yet? I know that was something we talked about a while back, but like, wondering, if you've ever, like Mitch, if you've ever instructed Jamie's students, or Jamie ever instructed Mitch's students, or is that even possible? Would that be something you would consider doing? Is there any value in that? Because one of the things we're trying to do is really look, we're building this virtual simulation lab, we call it, but really once you're in that virtual dimension, it opens up all these new possibilities that you've never been able to do before. And that's one of the key areas that I'm really interested in. So if you haven't yet, like, I just wondered if you could kind of brainstorm a bit on like, what would that be like? And is there any value in that?
Well, I just think about, so Mitch, for example, I don't believe has a huge background in obstetrics, right? Where Mitch is shaking their head no. So I have an extensive history working in obstetrics and emergency medicine. So with that, I might be able to say, bring a different spice to the obstetric scenarios. So I can see where that value, really tapping into your instructors' history, where they're coming from, what they can bring to it, and being able to understand, how some of these dynamics are working. So what I thought was great when we started with Acadicus here at our college, I was writing for OpenRN. And I was writing some of these scenarios that I couldn't wait to bring to my students, because I was waiting for my funding to come through, and I was waiting for my equipment to get here and find the room that I was going to be working from, right? So as I'm doing that, I'm starting to build out these scenarios, and there are things that are rich and full of depth. And I'm working with the folks from Acadicus and saying, you know what? This doesn't look quite right. Let's make sure we get this right, because we want it to look like it's coming from a hospital that has an OB unit. And you know what? Those guys worked with us and they got it right. So once that was completed, it's something that, is that a piece that maybe Mitch would have been able to pick out, like, hey, I wouldn't have realized that wasn't as realistic as perhaps you picked up on. So I think that's where we can lend to those pieces, is giving each other that help and feedback. And perhaps, one day I do go into NWTC virtually and help with an OB scenario because that is my background.
Mm-hmm. And I haven't done anything where I've gone like to another school's campus, but what I have done is I've run VR for a student who was on one of our other campuses. So I have some laptops and headsets at our Marinette campus, and I'm primarily based out of our Green Bay campus. So I was in Green Bay, and one of our instructors in Marinette was able to set up and get a student in the headset and so I was able to run a scenario from Green Bay with a student who was in Marinette. So we were an hour apart, as far as physical space from each other, but was still able to complete a scenario. And we were able to debrief in the space because I loaded up one of the great debrief spaces that they've made. I used the Meadow, and so we were able to exit out of the hospital room that we were in and have a nice relaxing space where we could spend time chatting and sharing. And so and it worked really nice. It worked really smooth. And the great thing is I had meetings and stuff, so I couldn't get to Marinette that day. So I literally just had to go into my lab, put on my headset, and I connected with the student. The student didn't have to drive an hour to me. So that was fantastic. And one of the things that we're actually doing is we are building and planning and opening our lab in Marinette, Shawano, and Sturgeon Bay. And so for Shawano, our instructor will be able to be in Shawano with her students. I'll be in Green Bay, and I can still load up things and run them for them right from Green Bay. And I don't have to be in Shawano to do that with them.
That's incredible. That's incredible. And I think that's a sign of things to come. I feel like that's really, because there's all these sort of like short-term advantages that everybody kind of is really starting to wrap their minds around collectively. I feel like, the cost savings and the access, but being able to, share resources across different campuses or, and having one hub where instructors are there, but like they can run simulations with students that are in different campus locations.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's huge. That's a really huge opportunity that I think people don't yet quite fully understand the range of what's possible once you can do that. Your instructors can be at home, they could be anywhere and they can run very high fidelity simulations and have, provide that experience. So.
And I've even figured out how to run 4 simulations at once.
At once.
I'm not there yet.
I open up 4 tabs on my browser. Or not 4 tabs. I load up Acadicus, and then what I can do is because I have I can bounce between the rooms really easily. And so yeah, as long as it's a basic sim that doesn't have a ton of moving pieces, I can bounce between them. And I've done 3 so far. I haven't got to full 4 yet, but I've practiced with 4 as a practice, and it worked well. So you can bounce between your rooms and work with students individually, and that worked really slick too.
That's very cool. Very cool. One of the things that, we'll hear more about next week when we watch the mini documentary on OpenRN, but there's a pretty rapidly worsening situation of where there's a shortage of clinicians. And, getting access to clinical sites is becoming increasingly challenging because of the fact that a lot of these sites are understaffed and they can't support students coming through like they used to be able to. And obviously the pandemic turned everything upside down and we still haven't recovered from that. And the shortage just continues to get worse. So I wondered if either or both of you had any comments on that. Like, what are the clinical placements like in your neck of the woods? Are there shortages? Do you see virtual reality as a way to help address that?
So I think about a couple of the colleges north of me, but are still in our technical college system, who just had a really large hospital that was one of our clinical partners close, right? And the displacement of all of those students and those spots, and to be able to pivot if you are solely dependent upon those sites, and to be able to bring these things in and get it going quickly can be difficult because you need that planning and you need that funding. We have nursing homes, long-term care facilities around us closing all the time. Every time one closes, we lose at least 8 clinical sites. Those are 8 spots that our students had that they no longer have. We, a hospital that I'm working with now decided, sorry, we can't take any students in our obstetrics or neonatal area this term because we're training too many of our own staff to try and get them at a level where they can function independently in order to train nursing students. So then how do they get those experiences? It's been great. I've been able to bring them into the headsets. I'm quite blessed that we have been able to create this environment where we can pivot. And in this post-pandemic world, we're able to offer to our students these clinical sites and be able to effectively reproduce, replicate, if you will, up to 50% of their clinical time and hours in simulation. And some of that is in extended reality, virtual reality with Acadicus.
We have a lot of the same situations happening where it's a challenge finding clinical sites. I will say one of the biggest challenges we have is not only OB, but also surgery. You know, trying to get where a student can go in and see the surgical process and observe in those areas. And that is a major challenge. And so the nice thing is that we can just make it. The other thing that I've actually had it be a great saving my hide at times is our sim lab was booked up and I had an instructor who came and said, my site told me that they're accrediting people here on this date and that we're not supposed to be at clinical. Sim is full. What can we do? We brought him into VR and we were able to run a sim that we had pre-written from the OER and use it on the fly. I had a day notice and we were able to still pull it together. And because of all those great resources that are already made from the OER, it wasn't a big deal. We were able to just do it. And the thing I will say is that students have said, Jamie's talking about her surveys. My surveys reflect about the same. 75% of students will rate us at a 4 or 5 on a 5-point scale. And the majority of that, about 60 to 70% of that is at a 5. So I mean, they're really enjoying it, and they say, I would rather do this than regular sim because regular sim is way more intimidating because I feel you staring at me. I feel your eyes going through my soul. That was what someone told me once, that you're looking through my soul. And they're like, in VR, I don't feel it. I don't feel you like, even though you're seeing everything I'm doing and you are there, but I don't feel it. And I can't speak to Jamie's, but you know, we know debrief is where the money is when it comes to simulation. And my students talk way more. They are way more active in debrief after a VR session versus an in-person session.
Have you had to cut your debrief sessions off? Like, I'm sorry, we have 5 minutes, give me what's left. Like, we have to wrap this up. I've never had to cut off a debrief session before. A lot of times you're, really trying to pull the information out of the students in VR. That's not the case.
They get so excited about it and they're so immersed in it that I've had to be like, okay, we have spent literally 22 minutes on this one topic, on this one question that I asked, and we have about 9 others to get through. So we're gonna have to stop talking about this question and move on, because I was like, I have an hour to debrief. You've used almost a third of it.
Well, like I said, 2 hours ago, I had 3 students in here. And these were students who, for different reasons of their own, had missed clinical and needed to do a clinical makeup. And we don't have space in the hospitals for them to be able to come back on a different day or a different time. So then they come to me, and two of the students were talking and kind of giggling and laughing. And I was like, what? Like, what's going on? And they're like, we almost want to call in sick to clinical on purpose so that we can come to VR because this was so amazing and we feel like we got so much out of it.
Mhm.
And I was like, don't do that. But I'm glad that you loved it. I'm glad that it was, you know, everything that they wanted it to be. And you can just hear the wows and the, oh my gosh, that's what that looks like. This is so cool. I put the students today into, his name is Hector Fernandez, and he is one of the simulations that I've worked on to make him an unfolding open RN case study. So you go in and he's part one where he's in long-term care facility and he has congestive heart failure. And then he continues throughout his process. But the students came into him as part one, and they're in doing a head-to-toe assessment. And the students are like, oh my gosh, did you see his pitting edema? That's what that looks like. And they're like, that, and that's hemosiderin staining. And they're so excited, and they're hearing the crackles in the lungs, and they're hearing the heart sounds, and he's interacting with them. And it's been such a compelling interaction and scenario that it's kind of like the bug has bit. The students are talking about it, and now I've got instructors pounding down my door.
Mm-hmm. You were talking about how realistic it was. I had a student the other day. It was on Monday of this week. We were doing a sim, and she was talking to her patient and doing some education, and there was a table at the end of the bed, and she forgot that she was in VR, and she put her arms out like she was gonna like rest her arms, and she almost fell down because she thought it was so real that she forgot that she was in the VR.
I had a student do that last week with a countertop. They went in and they're like, that's not a counter. I was like, nope, remember, you're in virtual reality. So safety. We have to be safe.
That's why we bought mats.
Right? I have them too. They're around the room.
Yeah, because that when you said that about the realism of it, it just made me giggle because literally I thought she was gonna fall over because she was just trying to talk to the patient and she was trying to be as realistic as she could, and so she went to plop herself to talk.
Bringing in that therapeutic communication, get down to their level, and
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so
virtual table.
Forget there was a couple questions I was going to ask. One of them was, you know, I guess taking us in kind of a different direction, like the clinical sites that you're talking about where there's the shortages. I sometimes wonder if there's an opportunity for more collaboration with those clinical sites through the virtual modality, right? Like, because they're short-staffed, like they're looking to recruit, so it would make sense to get them into that space too. So those clinical rotations could potentially be done, you know, in sort of a hybrid, right? Where maybe there are clinical, you know, people from the clinical sites that are joining virtually and going through things. Because it seems like, you know, a lot of when I talk to people, you know, that you might even if you get the clinical placement, you're probably not necessarily going to be getting a lot of experience when you're there. You might be just waiting and watching something over and over repeatedly, you know, like a knee surgery or something, you know, like I think somebody mentioned, you know, so I don't know, just kind of a little bit of a rambling thought there, but something I've been thinking a lot about lately is like, could we get that collaboration between the industry sites and the schools that have these wonderful VR labs now?
We're starting that now. One of our hospital systems here has reached out and they're wanting to use our lab as a place to bring in their new graduate nurses and use that as part of their onboarding and their nurse residency program, and having them come in and do simulations that are specialized to the floors and the type of nursing they'd be doing. So like on the neuro unit, that we would have a neuro scenario that their new grads could come in and work through, and have their nurse, like their nurse educator who's on their unit, be the person to come in and kind of run that with them. So one thing I'm looking at doing is trying to help start educating the nurse educators from our hospitals to how to run the VR lab and how to come in and set everything and get things going, and using that through our we call it CTED, which is like commercial training, education, and development. So like all the people in our district that are businesses that want to come in and use our services for education. So they're working through that process, which then means that we actually can charge and actually start getting money back into our program and to our school by creating this lab. And so we're going to end up actually paying for it. Even though it was paid for through grants, we're going to make all that money back, and we're actually going to have a revenue stream within our college with VR. And I will say that the nice thing is with the Acadicus, I can make any scenario I want. So if I need to make a neuro one or an ortho one or a cardiac or respiratory or literally almost anything we need to make, I can go in there and make a scenario for these new graduates to come in and do scenarios to help their onboarding be that much more effective.
That's awesome. I mean, you could imagine a day where we have a digital twin of each of these sites, right? So you go into Acadicus and you're actually learning where are the things in the cabinets. You know, these are standardized spaces for the most part, the hospital rooms in these locations. So you could build a replica of that so that when those graduates are, you know, onboarded into the real clinical sites that they're working, like they've got deja vu. They immediately hit the ground running because they know where everything is. They know how to be helpful. They've gone through some of those scenarios, and you know, just kind of get them up to speed before they're in, you know, on site. So a lot of possibilities there.
I agree.
And the revenue stream is something important to consider. I mean, money doesn't grow on trees in education, and we fight for every single penny that we get. And so, you know, being able to show the ability to generate funds using VR is a very important piece of, you know, as you're trying to get support from leadership, is here's a way that we could potentially even use this product that we're going to be paying for and get enough money back out of it that we could pay for its usage, and we don't have to pass that cost on to students. We don't have to figure out where we're going to get that money from. We know that we're going to have enough revenue coming in using that. And so that's one of the tasks that I'm going to be working on, is how do we utilize virtual reality as a revenue stream within the college to make sure that whenever someone's wanting to make a cut to something, be like, don't touch us because we pay for ourselves. You don't get away.
Right.
Yep.
Well, and I think that kind of lends itself to that buy-in too. You have to sell this first to your admin team, right? Whoever that is. If you're at a college, you're working with the deans, or if you're in a hospital setting, you're working with your management. Mitch can attest to this. When I was first starting out, I needed to sell this. So I brought my Dean of Health and Public Safety and the Associate Dean of Health and Public Safety, who is also our Dean of Nursing, to his lab because I wanted them to be able to get in the headsets. Next week, when we see this video, you're going to hear me say, just get in the headset, put it on. Once we got them into the headsets, they were sold. It was done. And they worked hard to help me bring this to fruition because they found that much impact in the, what were we there, an hour?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that much impact in that little bit of time. So
that is awesome. You know, and we've been seeing a lot more recently where once excuse me, an XR lab is set up, you know, local municipalities could use it to run multiple casualty scenarios, which is something they all need to be doing anyway. They really should be doing. You know, it's a unfortunate reality that these things are becoming increasingly commonplace, and training all the different agencies and all the different people that need to be involved with those activities. Running those simulations in real life is a really expensive, complicated, big deal, right? And it just doesn't happen as often as it should. But once you've got the XR Center, you could have those agencies rotating through and going through multiple casualty, going through triage, going through, you know, these exercises so that they're ready in the event of a real world emergency. So it's like once you've got that, it's like this holodeck that you can invite people in to run all kinds of different simulations. It's a really great resource to have.
And I know
And-
Mitch and I are talking from the nursing lens, but I'm also an EMT, and Bill Ballo, he was on earlier. He's a paramedic, and we're working with our health and public safety students. So police, fire, EMS, and the mass casualty scenario that is out there and already built. I'm looking at bringing in some of the Gen 2 patients and altering that a little bit and giving them not only, hey, let's prioritize, but now let's pick one and work with it, right? And that would be easy to translate into the real world for those who are already out in the field and just need training hours. Because they do, you know, EMTs and paramedics have to have so many hours of training each year to maintain their certifications. This would be something that they could definitely implement.
Yep, absolutely. Well, we're approaching the top of the hour. I want to just really appreciate the time that you spent with us today and sharing your insights. The presentation was great. The follow-up, discussion is great. Really valuable insights. I really appreciate that very much, and look forward to our next Friday. We'll be watching that video. It's a great video. It really is. We had a great time. We brought a crew up there. Brave Bird Productions came up and worked with the team there, and just, I don't know, this fantastic quality. It's a great mission that we're on to try to, help address these shortages. So hopefully we can, we'll watch that video and then we'll have a discussion and panel discussion afterwards. So be sure to check that out. So thanks again for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Glad to be here.
See ya. Have a great weekend.